When the Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes was announced, the internet went mad. This book wasn't the Hamish Abernathy Quarter-Quell story fans had been begging for years. Instead, Suzanne Collins had announced she would be telling the origin story of President Snow, the widely hated dictator of the original trilogy, and was met with a digital firestorm. How dare she force readers to side with a dictator and show compassion towards him? How could we, the readers, ever be expected to submit ourselves to his perspective of things? I, for one, was not keen to revisit the world through President Snow's eyes, nor be persuaded to fathom his moral compass, the one that led him to becoming a dictator of Panem. And in fact, it took me 3 years and the promise of a new film to pick up this book. I've also just noticed a really deep hole in the garden behind me. That is scary. That is fitting with the title of this book. So, getting back on track, did I like The Ballad of Songbirds and Snakes? Did reading the origin story for a character I already absolutely hate tinge my reading experience? And why do I think Suzanne Collins decided that this was the way she wanted to expand the world of the Hunger Games? And was it even the right choice? Let's discuss. As an aside, this video will be spoiler-free, however will contain information perhaps from like the first 1 or 2 chapters of the book, mostly just character introductions and my thoughts about them. As I've said, I hate President Snow. In the lead up to prying this book open, I reread the entire Hunger Games trilogy for the first time in 7 years. You'll be pleased to hear I still found myself hating him as much as I did on my first read in 2015, and I think having that reminder of the things he did in those books helped guide my reading of Ballad. I was reminded that in his old age, President Snow can be characterized by his, supposedly, tight grip on the capital, calculated disposition, and well thought out power plays. On my reread, I appreciated his mind games all the much more than my first read, but he's still the monster I remembered him to be. I went into reading Ballad and found myself confronted by a teenage Snow, who, while still containing a deep sense of identity and a social standing, calculating mind, and allegiance to the capital, still has a spark of light in him for life that hasn't yet been drowned out. I anticipated that the boyish sweetness he starts the book with would dissipate and the real monster we all know and hate would quickly unfurl, and thus treated him like a morally grey character. This also meant every time I found myself almost, rooting for him, I tell myself to cut it out. I can tell Suzanne Collins anticipated that readers would be immediately distrusting of President Snow, as referenced in this book, Coriolanus, and wrote him accordingly. There were moments I was on the edge of my seat, drawn deep into the emotional beats and the action, the moments that Suzanne Collins writes so well with swift descriptions of fluid dialogue, and found myself actively trying to pull myself away. As my eyes flickered rapidly across sentences, I had to keep Coriolanus at a mental arm's reach and remind myself that the bad things that happened to him are probably, well, definitely, for the best. And things do go wrong for him, you'll be happy to hear. Things that you read and have no idea how he'll climb back from. The book starts with him torn down, such that Collins can build him up and promptly tear him back down again throughout the story. She expertly conditions you to care about the events happening to and around Coriolanus, if not for his character, but for those who he is surrounded with. She ties characters and plot lines together such that you have to root for him for the sake of the characters you, the rueful reader, haven't put a mental wall up against. My deep distrust of the main character also extended to Lucy Gray. She's the tribute from District 12 that Coriolanus is paired up with to mentor. It's the first year the Hunger Games have mentors involved. At this point, they come from the prestigious academy Coriolanus shines at. Lucy Gray is full of life from the beginning. She's reaped for the Hunger Games and seen dressed in a colourful dress of cascading fabric, and begins from that moment the performance she realises these games are. The easiest description of her character that I've seen float around the internet is that while Katniss was a hunter placed into a performance, Lucy Gray is a natural-born performer placed into a hunt. This aspect of her character, where you know she's putting on a show, meant I often didn't trust what she was saying. On reflection, I think this can be attributed to her first conversation with Coriolanus containing a blatant performative lie. I think I'd recommend that anyone who put off reading this book because it's about President Snow, pick it up just to read about her instead. While we never hear of Lucy Gray in the original trilogy, and you'll have to read Ballad to find out why, she's a very welcome and vibrant entry to the Hunger Games canon. See, I was distrusting of Coriolanus because of who I knew he would become, and because I found his obsessions with power as displayed throughout this book in different forms quietly disturbing. Meanwhile, I was distrusting of Lucy Gray because I felt like she was hiding things, and in a way I like that, because since we are reading from Coriolanus' perspective, I wanted her to stay on her toes around him and keep information back for her own safety. And to a degree, I think the way I placed my own opinion on how Lucy Gray should be interacting with Coriolanus, and my expectations that Coriolanus' intentions wouldn't be pure, impacted my experience of reading the book in both positive and negative ways. For example, there are instances where I was expecting Coriolanus to perhaps be plotting something, because, you know, he's 18-year-old President Snow. But no, sometimes he was being genuine for genuine's sake. And for Lucy Gray, sometimes it was as if I was trying to anticipate a plot twist, and I was expecting her to be lying, but then she wouldn't have been, and was actually being earnest with her reactions. I'd be interested to hear in the comments if any of you who've read this book had a similar experience. So then, having read the book, do I think this was the right story for Suzanne Collins to tell? Or do I think we've still been robbed of the Hamish What a Quell story? To be honest, I think this story was the right one. Please don't tune out President Snow haters, I am one of you. This book is a really good glimpse into the capital 10 years after the dark days have ended, and the mentality of the people who live there, and the parallels between the capital and us readers. Because here's the thing, if you're watching this video and you've read this book, you are in many ways more likely akin to the capital than to the district rebellions. It reminds me a lot of how in the Bible when Jesus says it's easier for a camel to squeeze through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven, and we read that passage of the Bible, much like reading about the capital in Ballad, and think it doesn't apply to us. But while I don't know the situation of you who are watching this, I know that many who do would be, to use the language of Suzanne Collins, without want, or at least without want for the true basic necessities of living, such as water, food, shelter, and in our times, the internet. So when reading this book, especially in today's times, it's not hard to see yourself reflected in the pages if you allow yourself, as I would argue you should. As this book is set around the 10th Hunger Games, we're shown that there are people in the capital who don't tune in, and actively don't want to watch it, and still see it for the barbaric murder of children that it is, but are or feel too powerless to stop it. It's not an overwhelming number of people, since the games still happen, but they exist. The language used by those in the capital towards those from the districts is on a whole still upsetting and discriminatory, and a clear marker of who maintains what we readers would call humanity to those in the districts and otherwise, in the capital's post-war times. The way Collins uses the language of those in the capital to maintain the us-them mentality of the dark days, a mentality that we see continues still 64 years later, could serve as a great study into how language controls us as people. When you control what people can say, how they refer to others, how they aren't allowed to refer to others, what thoughts someone is allowed and disallowed to think, you begin to see the power language has in controlling the thoughts, feelings, and actions of a populace. We have one key character in Ballad, Sejanus, who I'm definitely not pronouncing the name correctly of, who from the get-go hates the games and all they stand for. In part, this is because he himself originates from District 2, but by means of his father's allegiance to the capital and high position in the weapons business, was granted the capital life. He goes as far as loudly proclaiming his opposition to the games over and over again, in the academy even. It's a dangerous thing, and while I have mixed feelings about the writing of his character, I think he adds a bit of grounded realism to the story. He says out loud the feelings we the readers have towards the games, where we draw ourselves out of the pages and away from the allure of it all. And while there were times in the book I felt he was making the same points over and over again, without much progression in the depth of his objections to the games, I think he is a necessary character in the story. Sejanus shows us that this early in Panem's history, prior to the rule of Snow, there remained some protections around freedom of speech for capital citizens, both agreeing and opposing the capital, albeit with varying degrees of permanence. I can't help but think Coriolanus' experiences with Sejanus informed how he would go on to dictate over Panem, having seen firsthand the dangers to his ideology such behaviour can cause. Ultimately, I think the expansion of the world of the Hunger Games had to happen this way. While we could have followed another character during this time period, perhaps Lucy Gray herself, that tale wouldn't have given us an as complete and new perspective on the capital and Panem during these times. We've learnt about life in District 12 already through Katniss, so we wouldn't have gained as much from Lucy Gray's perspective. And as much as I too am still holding out for a Hamish story, many rough events from his games and life afterwards are already documented in the original trilogy. This was the story that had to be told. It had to be Coriolanus' perspective to let us into all these corners of the capital, to see the thoughts and morality of people from different walks of life, and see how the early games and capital control were orchestrated. Through following Coriolanus, threads left behind from the original trilogy can be tugged at and unravelled, but only by his hand. So, as much as I still can't let go of how much I hate Snow, which in itself is a testament to Suzanne Collins' writing, this was the correct story for her to tell. It may not have been the story we, the readers, wanted, but it's what we needed. Let me know your thoughts on the book in the comments below, and the movie if you've seen it. And feel free to subscribe or give this video a like to send me a little dopamine boost. I'd like to make more videos similar to this, but no promises. Now I'm going to run away from whatever creature has been hiding in the bushes behind me near that deep and scary hole. Okay, I'm going back inside.